Morning, 1 minute after 9 on Thursday, April the 30th, coming to you live from Leeds, where the LBC general election battle bus has pulled up. The three party leaders, of course, will be taking part in that TV show later tonight. And each day during the campaign, we're giving you the chance to question a senior politician about the issues that matter to you. We'll be hearing from all the main parties as Britain decides. And this morning, we're joined by leader of the Lib Dems, Deputy Prime Minister Nick Clegg, in this city, of course, for that debate tonight. If this bus had windows, we could almost see the town hall where Mr. Clegg will be appearing. But he's here now to take your questions. Nick Clegg, welcome on board my battle bus.
Good morning. Look, I'll tell you the reason we can't look out the windows. There's a huge, oversized picture of you
Right.
On the side of the bus, and I've just had to have the unedifying experience of walking,
Yes.
opening a door which is placed directly over your oversized stomach on the
Yes.
side. I've walked into Nick Ferrari's stomach.
Yeah, you don't want to know where they put the fuel filler cap. I can assure. Just think when you leave, it's like Alien. You burst out.
Yeah,
right, well, if you want to talk about pictures, perhaps I can
Yes.
refer you to the front page of the Thunderer, the London Times, the
Yes.
Times newspaper. There is you with your always stunning-looking wife.
Yes.
Clearly, you
shall pass on
can't
the
even
compliments.
make batter. Is she actually telling you off there for making batter the wrong way?
I think you got it completely wrong way around. I actually, this is seriously true. I rang Miriam for a joke about half an hour ago and said, "Have you seen the front page of the Times?" And she said, "No." I said, "Well, look at it, because the photo looks, to all intents and purposes, as if I am teaching Miriam how to cook, which is such a total role reversal of the truth."
Yes. Is rhubarb crumble a big dish in Spain?
It was actually apple crumble.
Oh, right.
It was apple crumble. Does it say rhubarb crumble?
No, it just says crumble. I
Right,
took a
is it-
punt and I got it wrong.
No, you got it wrong.
As I do most things
Apple,
in life.
not rhubarb.
Well,
Right,
that
I'm
can't be a
glad-
big
I'm glad
Spanish
I'm
dish,
glad we're
can it?
focusing on the
Yes.
important things a week before the election.
All right, shall we move on to some calls? First up is Don in Orpington. Don, you're through to the Deputy Prime Minister. Go ahead.
Morning, Don.
All right, let's.
So, Don, without perhaps expanding, because it would take quite a lot of time on my views on religion and spirituality, I'm never have been a sort of hardline atheist. I'm much more questioning than that, much more of an agnostic. And my children are brought up in the Catholic faith, because my wife is Catholic, and I've got many members of my family who are people of faith. I am not, but I have to say to you, I don't agree with you that we should somehow, say that faiths and denominations can't try and provide an education to children in keeping with their beliefs, with their religious tenets. I don't think that would be the right thing. I think where faith schools, and to be fair, the vast majority of faith schools do this anyway, where faith schools have a real duty is to make sure that even though that their education is based on their own values and principles and their religion, I think it's important that they should become sort of engines of integration, where they reach out and teach about other faiths and they don't become sort of silos of segregation. And I think, to be fair, the vast majority of faith schools, in my experience, in fact some of them are, because they are faith schools, are take their duty to teach other faiths more seriously than non-faith schools.
All right, thank you for that. David in Enfield. David, you're through to Nick Clegg. Go ahead.
Hello, David. Yeah, fine. How are you? I think the minimum wage needs to go up, and of course, I can't imagine. I'm very lucky. I'm in a very well-paid job, as is Miriam, and it's important that the minimum wage does increase and increases faster than prices. And thankfully, that is now happening. And one of the last things that David Cameron and I did together in the coalition government was to announce a significant increase in the minimum wage, and on the apprenticeship wage that you've talked about, we actually, which is very unusual for governments to do, we defied the recommendations of the Low Pay Commission and recommended a much sharper increase in the minimum wage. But I think the minimum wage combined with taking more and more people on low pay out of income tax, which of course is what we've done by lifting the point at which you pay income tax to £10,600, and I want to go a lot further, so that you pay no income tax on the first £12,500 you earn, and combined with obviously encouraging everybody wherever they can to pay the living wage, which is higher than the minimum wage. I hope over time that will alleviate the pressure, the huge pressure, which you're quite right, lots of people on low and middle incomes have been.
David's actual question is, could you afford to live? I appreciate you said, do you think you would actually manage? You're in a fortunate position. You're in a fortunate position.
Yeah, I was saying since I
you
haven't,
don't think you could?
Well, since I haven't experienced it, I can't put that to the test, David. But of course,
Well, the question is, do you think you could?
Well, I think it'd be really tough.
So you think you might?
I think it'd be really tough.
David, bring you back in.
But David, all I would say to you is that the group, the Low Pay Commission, and this was established under Labour, and I think was the sensible thing for them to do, to take, in a sense, to try and take the politics out of the setting of the minimum wage as much as possible, isn't just a bunch of sort of flinty-faced accountants. It has representatives from the trade unions. It's a very sort of broad-based body, and they make recommendations to governments. They always have about where you set the minimum wage, consistent with the increase in the minimum wage, but also consistent with keeping people in employment. And that's the difficult balance you always have. And as I say, we took actually the rather unusual decision of saying to the Low Pay Commission, no, we think the apprenticeship wage is too low and it's got to increase much more rapidly. We're increasing the minimum wage now well in excess of the increase in prices. So it's well in increase, beyond the increase is well beyond inflation. And it is, you're right, the balance that is always, it's a difficult balance, but that needs to be struck. Because if you in a sense were to completely defy the Low Pay Commission, they would tell you that all you end up doing is putting people who are struggling out of work, which isn't exactly going to help them in their day-to-day life.
All right, we move on. Thank you for the call, David. Let's go to Paul in London Bridge. You're through to the Deputy Prime Minister. Paul, go ahead.
Morning, Paul. Yep. Yep. I actually.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay. Well, I'll make sure you get it, Paul. But let's hear from Mr. Clegg. Mr. Clegg.
Paul, I basically actually agree with you. I think there should have been a debate between Ed Miliband, David Cameron, Nigel Farage, not Nick Ferrari, by the way, Paul, Nigel Farage, and myself, because these are the four parties that have been identified, even by I think it's the broadcasting regulator. And, they've said these are the major parties, and I've been saying to the broadcasters for months now, and as my team, look, just get all four together and let's have a head-to-head debate. But look, you know what happened then. Then David Cameron dithered and ducked and weaved and didn't want this, and then they have one debate with all seven of us, and then another debate, by the way, where I felt quite annoyed that Nigel Farage was there and I wasn't. Do you remember that? There was this debate a couple of weeks ago where there was nobody from the parties that actually governed the country over the last 5 years, and I was immensely irritated that I wasn't invited to go to that debate, and then even more irritated still to hear correspondence from the very broadcasting organisation who'd organised it, the BBC, saying I'd chosen not to go when they had excluded me. So look, Paul, I basically
So what can come out of tonight, really?
Well, Paul, I'm not sure if you're aware. It's not actually a debate between us. I'm not sure if you're aware of this, Paul. It's half an hour first, I think, David Cameron being questioned by members of the public, then Ed Miliband half an hour, and then me. Look, it's great. I'm really looking forward to it. Any opportunity I can take to tell my side of the story, Paul, because frankly no one else is going to do it for me, is something I grab with both hands. But you're right, it would have been much better if we'd had a proper debate with all of the major parties.
But Mr. Clegg, what of Paul's central point, in a way, which is diminishing his belief in democracy? He doesn't think it's fair that Farage has had a shout or whatever it might be.
Well, look, I don't think it was fair that I was excluded
Right.
from the debate, yet alone then to be told that I chose not to go to the debate, which I wasn't invited to. I don't think it's fair that the British people, which is Paul's point, which is basically, Paul, where I agree with you, haven't seen a debate on sort of national television between the four major party leaders,
Right.
of Conservatives, Labour, Liberal Democrats and UKIP. That was always my preference.
When I spoke with Nigel Farage earlier today, when Mr. Clegg, he says the BBC is run by a left-wing North London media elite. Do you recognise that as being the BBC?
No, I think these sort of slightly sweeping characterisations of a big sprawling organisation like that. I don't think it serves any purpose to do that. And honestly, my own recommendation to Nigel Farage is sort of, I've learned the hard way, whinging about this newspaper or that newspaper or this press organisation or that. As a politician, you just got to deal with the world the way it is, and not sort of whinge about it too much. But I agree with Paul's point, which is the public would have benefited from a proper sort of head-to-head debate of all of the party leaders.
We did what we could, and taking on board it's not a debate, but I asked Nigel Farage, had it been a debate and he'd been able to challenge you and the Prime Minister, Mr. Miliband, with a question, what might that question have been?
Well, as you know, my response, and we rehearsed this, Nigel Farage and I, in the debate that he and I had together, one of which you presided over, Nick. I don't think he's coming clean with the British people about the disastrous consequences of his remedy, which is pulling us out of the world's largest marketplace.
Address his point, though. Once these Libyans, Somalians, whatever they might be, once they get an EU passport, there's nothing to stop them coming into Britain. When you come to his point, that
he is right to say there is one of the things that sort of that singles out membership of the European Union is the freedom to move around the European Union. And by the way, it's a two-way street.
Well, they're going to come to Britain, aren't they? We're the powerhouse of Europe, courtesy of your coalition government, you would tell me. Oh, sorry, did I get that wrong?
No, you didn't.
Thank you. So we are the powerhouse of
it's just a clever way of putting the challenge. But
I've been doing this for a while now, Mr. Clegg.
You have. No, as I saw on the oversized picture blazing on the side of the bus.
I can make
Can't
it
be another
crumble,
reason
but
why you're up there in that giant size. But with a door in your...
Back to the central point.
Back to the central point. This is actually a two-way street. There are just as many people from Britain, or almost exactly as many people from Britain living and working elsewhere in the European Union as there are Europeans coming here. Yes, we need to tighten the rules. Freedom to move should never be the same as freedom to claim. But where Nigel Farage and I disagree, and we've been very open with it in front of the public and with each other, is I think the remedy to that is to make our country poorer, to throw lots of people out of work, to make to see investment drain out of the United Kingdom, to see fewer companies invest in our country and deprive our kids and our grandkids of job opportunities. Of course, I don't think I don't think poverty. And Nigel Farage once came quite close to sort of saying that a weaker or poorer economy is somehow a price worth paying. I just don't agree with him.
But lastly on this, because we have got other calls,
sure.
that there is nothing to stop these poor souls who are in the middle of the Mediterranean, and dear God, they need all the help they can get, but when they're safely delivered to Italy or wherever, there's nothing to stop them once they sort themselves out marching to Britain.
Well, it depends if they're asylum seekers. Of course there is. I mean, and I think Nigel Farage is making a massive leap from taking.
Well, he said some of them could be Islamic fanatics. He said a couple of days ago.
There was a huge
difference.
difference.
Islamic army on its way.
A refugee coming into a certain other European member state, a refugee does not have an Italian or Belgian or French or Spanish passport. They are refugees. They're not. They don't become European Union citizens. So Nigel Farage, once again.
So what do we do with them? Just take them back?
Well, no, we treat them with the compassion and dignity which we should treat all refugees, and then their asylum applications or then their refugee status will be looked at. And some of them, of course, some of them should and will want to eventually go back home. But what I'm saying
Why
is,
would they want to go back home? They've just risked their lives to try and get across to Lampedusa.
Because
What do I want to go back to Somalia for? I've travelled halfway through Africa to get to Europe.
most of them, as you know, come from Syria and Eritrea,
Yes.
where there is a horrific wars raging in both.
I don't blame them for a second.
No, of course. If you look, if
I do the same.
If your home and your community,
Yes.
your kith and kin were being threatened by violence and war, of course you do everything to try and keep yourself safe, including risking your life by travelling huge distances. But it's equally obvious to observe that when those wars, and eventually there will be peace in Eritrea, eventually there will be peace in Syria, of course you'd like to see these people, or at least some of them, return. What I'm saying is that Nigel Farage is equating their presence on European soil as refugees of war with them being fully fledged passport holding
But they can get
citizens.
into Britain.
Well, not unless they have become European Union citizens first.
Okay, we must move on to other questions. Let's put Rosetta of Chingford through to the Deputy Prime Minister. Rosetta.
Hello, Rosetta. What an unusual name. Sorry. So, Rosetta, well, obviously I don't accept your characterisation. Let me try and give a better explanation than clearly the way you view my previous explanations. We were between a rock and a hard place as a party. On tuition fees, as you know, fees had been introduced and then dramatically increased by the previous Labour administration. When we came into government, there was absolutely no money left. And both the parties, the other parties, the Conservative and Labour parties, were supportive of the review, which was commissioned by the previous Labour government, conducted by Lord Brown, into the future financial viability of our university system. And this, dare I say it, Rosetta, is the bit perhaps of my explanation that I don't dwell on as much because it's quite technical, but it's actually very important. And Lord Brown recommended, as I say, commissioned by Labour, supported by the Conservatives, that there should be no upper limit whatsoever, never mind 9,000. There should be no upper limit whatsoever. Fees can go up to 15,000, 16,000 or whatever. So there was absolutely no way, Rosetta, that the Liberal Democrats, I'm a leader of a party of 8% of MPs in the House of Commons, given all those facts, that Labour had introduced fees, increased fees, had commissioned the report which said there should be no upper limit on fees, the Conservatives wanted fees to go up, there was no money left, it would have been a very expensive thing to try and scrap them altogether, clearly in those circumstances. There was absolutely no way that we could put into practice what we had put in our manifesto. So Vince Cable and David Willits and others basically secured the fairest deal they could get for graduates. Now, look, what I've experienced over the last 5 years is that there are some people, you might count amongst them, it's a free country, you're perfectly entitled to do so, who just, they can't forgive and forget that, that we couldn't put that one thing in place. There are plenty of other fair-minded folk who I think accept there are a whole bunch of other things, from increased apprenticeships, fairer pensions, fairer taxes, healthy meals at lunchtime for little kids at school, childcare, shared parental leave, and so on, equal marriage, all of these things which we have done, which we've stuck to our guns on. And at the end of the day, you, Rosetta, and many other people will be entirely free to either choose to judge us on the one thing we couldn't put into practice, or I hope give us a more fair-minded judgment, A, of the reasons why we couldn't, and secondly, of the many, many, many more things that we did put into practice.
A quick response from Rosetta so I can get more callers on. Rosetta, a one-liner response, if you would, please. Okay. In a sentence, if you would, I'm not being rude, Rosetta. This is totally my fault because I've got so many callers. But do go ahead, brief. This isn't Mr. Clegg asking to stop it. I hasten to add. Yes, go ahead. Go ahead, Rosetta. All right. All right.
Well, that's nonsense.
Okay,
I mean, that
okay,
really
Rosetta,
is.
I have
That
a
really
quick
is.
response.
Well, I
Mr.
mean, that latter point. I mean, Rosetta can say what she likes about my motives. I don't agree, but simply misdescribing the system, I just think is just very. It's just not very fair on listeners. As Rosetta very, very well knows, actually the amount of money that is paid out by graduates under the new system every week and every month is actually significantly lower, particularly for those on low and average incomes, than it was under the old system.
We must move on, and we must start featuring some of the emails as well. Graham from Bushy. Below, how many seats won do you think your position will be untenable? Is it 25, 30, or what number?
Well,
I'm chuckling.
No, I'm chuckling because I'm not going to get into the numbers game. I'm a campaigning politician seeking to encourage people to vote for the only party, the Liberal Democrats, that can ensure that we remain stable and strong and fair and decent, and we are united as a country. And
what are your movements next Thursday night?
What are my movements?
You obviously you wait in your constituency, and then what happens? You will start ringing each other. How are you going to do the deal?
I don't know when my count is going to be declared. It might be sort of 4. Last time it went on till 6 o'clock in the morning.
Did it now? Right.
Yeah,
okay.
didn't
But the calls start, obviously, as all you party leaders start to know.
I actually, funny enough, think this time, since there are so many different permutations, there's so much uncertainty, everybody's so knackered, I suspect everybody would quite sensibly, this is certainly what I'd recommend, take a little time just to absorb what has happened, understand what the instructions are that the British people have given us, and then act.
So what does that mean? Have a slice of apple crumble on the Thursday night,
rhubarb crumble.
Or rhubarb crumble, and then get into it Friday lunch.
No, it doesn't. Look, actually, as
the nation is intrigued. How does it work? Who rings who first?
The nation is.
Is it like courting, where you don't want to be the first one to make the call?
My view, as you know, has always been that the party that has won the biggest mandate, the most votes and seats, even if it hasn't won an absolute majority, that is the party. It seems to be in a democracy that has the right to try and make the first move. So, in the terms that you put it, I think the person who first picks up the phone and makes a phone call, however they decide to communicate.
How do you communicate? Is it phone calls? It must be, or is it emails, or do you have sort of intermediaries? Do you have go-betweens?
There are pigeons, carrier pigeons. There are.
Tell me it's not telepathy.
There are things called emails.
It's all done through email.
There are teams. Yes, there are. It's
I see.
It's not hugely complicated. But no, the more serious point is, given that we now know that no one's going to win next Thursday. I mean, obviously Ed Miliband and David Cameron are charging around the place saying they're going to win. They're not. And they know they're not. I think the party that has the first right to try and assemble a government, they may or may not succeed, should.
Does David know that you know that he knows he's not going to win? I'm just intrigued.
To say it again?
Does David know?
Cameron.
Yeah, that you know that he knows he's not going to win.
I think he knows, or should know,
that
everybody knows across the whole country what he should know, which he doesn't appear to acknowledge that he knows, which is that he's not going to win.
We better go on to other calls. Where are we? Sam, you've been very patient, Sam in Ilford. I'm sorry, it's this battle bus fatigue, I think. Sam's in Ilford. You're through to the Deputy Prime Minister. Go ahead, Sam.
Morning, Sam. Not even been
built.
Yeah. Sam, it's interesting. Nick Ferrari will confirm this. I think this issue has probably come up more regularly than almost any other issue during the time, weekly sort of phone-ins I've been doing. Namely, as you, Sam, obviously represent the views of many people who say, "Hang on a minute, why are we sending money to other parts of the world when we need money back home?" It's a really difficult one, and I'm afraid I will repeat what I said. I know you won't agree with this, Sam, but I firmly believe that we shouldn't make it an either-or choice. In other words, the fact that we are as generous as we are to refugees and people suffering the terrible plight of those who are suffering from war in Syria or those who are now suffering in Nepal, I just don't think we make ourselves any safer or stronger by not showing our generosity towards those countries. On education, Sam, just since you raise it, I certainly strongly agree with you. But the worst thing to do would be to now shortchange the future generation by cutting back on the money we put into nurseries, schools and colleges. And that's what I've said in sort of quite an unusual move earlier this week, that the Liberal Democrats will not enter into any government, any coalition government in the future, if the Labour and Conservative parties insist on the cuts that they both now are planning to impose on the education system.
All right, a couple of questions from me. You'll have had sight of some of the front pages this morning, Mr. Clegg. The front page of The Guardian tells us that Danny Alexander, the Lib Dem Chief Secretary of the Treasury, who sat in that very seat on Monday when we were in Glasgow and we gave him a giant haggis to thank him for his trip, has taken the extraordinary step of lifting the lid on Conservative plans for an £8 billion plan to cut welfare, including slashing child benefits and tax credits. This was back in June 2012. Why has he broken ranks like that? Do you support that? Do you condone
Yes,
that?
I do, because I share Danny's intense frustration, sort of verging on sort of anger, that the Conservatives think it's okay a week before an election to say that they're going to take the equivalent of £1,500 off 8 million of the most vulnerable families in this country, and they can't even be bothered to spell out to the families with folk who are disabled, with children, those who have fallen on hard times. They can't even be bothered to spell out exactly what their plans involve.
But surely there are discussions that go on at various levels within the cabinet when you form a coalition government that have to stay. What happens in the meeting stays in the meetings.
Look,
He's leaked this.
Look, I think it is deceitful of the
Well,
Conservative.
why didn't you, if you've known since 2012, why didn't you tell us in 2012?
Because I never imagined we'd have an election campaign where a major party aspiring to govern this country would insult the intelligence of the British people by saying we're going to take 1,500 quid off 8 million of the most vulnerable families. We're going to single out the working age poor. The Conservatives, by the way, the cuts that they want to take out of it. No, it's very important. They want to take the equivalent of pretty well exactly what we spend on disability living allowance. So if it's not child benefit, which they're now disowning, is it then they're going to scrap all of disability allowance? It's about exactly the same amount as we spend on employment support allowance. Are they going to scrap that altogether?
But if it's so deceitful, why didn't you tell us years ago? You just wait till the eve of a general election.
I've been saying day after day after day, ever since George Osborne made that fateful announcement with barely disguised relish last autumn, that the Conservative Party would ask the working age poor.
Why didn't you tell us last autumn, Mr. Clegg?
I did.
But why weren't these papers revealed last autumn?
I said over and over again it was wrong for the Conservative Party, as it is wrong. I viscerally feel
this is blatant election.
No. It is wrong of the Conservatives to try and pull the wool over people's eyes and say that they're going to ask the working age poor of this. They're not going to ask people in big houses and with and their sort of very wealthy friends to make any additional contribution through the tax system to balance the books. They're saying they're going to take 12 billion quid away from the most vulnerable people in this country, and they can't even be bothered to spell out who will actually pay the price.
So journalists can be arrested and charged over confidential documents being leaked, but it's all right.
He's not leaking a document.
But it's all.
He hasn't leaked a document. He's just said
it's all right to reveal confidential conversations such as these.
Of course, it's perfectly okay to say that the Conservative Party, since they themselves won't tell the British people how they're going to hurt some of the most vulnerable people in this country, that we spell out to people the kind of things they clearly have in mind.
One other front page, we've got a minute and a bit left. Lib Dems to revolt over revolting Lib Dems, Mr. Clegg, over fresh pact with the Tories. You face huge resistance from within your own party if you try to push through a second coalition deal with the Conservatives. Say Lib Dems quotes at every level, whatever that might mean. Is that in the elevator? I have no idea.
Look, I don't actually think that article says anything that I don't know and don't believe myself, which is that any decision by the Liberal Democrats to enter into any new coalition, of course, will be taken collectively, and we'd all have to agree it. I actually, funny enough, share a lot of the wariness that's reflected in that article, given the ups and downs the Liberal Democrats have had. Of course, you would tread warily by entering into another coalition, but we're not going to rule out another coalition with either Labour or the Conservatives, because we are pluralists. We believe in the give and take of grown-up politics, particularly where no one wins outright, which is going to happen next Thursday.
We have a final question, time for one. Rob is in Carmarthen. Rob, ask your question of the Deputy Prime Minister.
Morning. Oh, go on. All right. Right, you have done.
Got to move you to your question, if you could, Rob. Got to move you to your question, sir. Thank you. Thank you.
Well, Rob, first, as you might remember, and you certainly hope you do as a pollster, we might have done well in the polls last election. We actually lost seats. Interesting enough, I think sometimes people misremember the last election. We didn't. We actually returned fewer MPs than we. And I, by the way, think this election will be almost the reverse. We obviously won't do as well in the polls, but actually return many more seats than the kind of the cottage industry of punditry and pessimism is presently suggesting. Why do I believe that, Rob? Why am I as optimistic as I am? Because where we get our story across, it's a really good story. It's a story I'm really proud of. We stepped up to the plate. We did it at some short-term political cost, but we did it for the country. They wouldn't have the economic recovery now. If we hadn't done that, we've given people tax cuts, better pensions, more apprenticeships, better schools, shared parental leave. We defended civil liberties. We've promoted big reforms like equal marriage. That is a fantastic record of a party punching way above its weight, and where people hear that message, they respond to it very well.
All right, we're nearly there. We were in Birmingham yesterday, as you might be aware, with my battle bus, Deputy Prime Minister, and I had White D climb on board, and we reflected the TV show that will be going on later tonight, the three of you. You, David Cameron, Ed Miliband, and I decided to play with White D, Snog, Marry, Avoid.
You didn't. Kebab first.
There we go, you've got a fan.
Right, but if I understand it correctly, she can only do it once she's had a couple of bottles of whiskey.
I think most of you are going to have a couple of bottles
to
of whiskey.
endure the experience.
Well, this is the end of election call, and now we move away from all election matters because, right, of course, we used to have something called Call Clegg. And we thought it would be nice just to reflect for a couple of minutes of some of the highlights and the lowlights we've had together. Nick Clegg. Oh. Yeah.
Very good. Oh, she is. It's 2.5 years, isn't it? Is it really?
2.5, yeah, about 30 seconds to go. 30 seconds to go. So that's 2.5 years, Mr. Clegg.
Yes.
Is this the last time? Maybe. I don't know, as the song goes. But
I very much hope not.
I hope
I've
not.
enjoyed it enormously.
I'm prepared to give you a chance. I fear it might be the last time. I fear that you might not be coming back as Deputy
dear.
Prime Minister.
Oh, dear. I'm sorry
But
to
I'd
hear
love
that.
to have a €50 or a £50 wager with you that this will be the last election call, Clegg. Are you prepared to take the chance that you will be returning as
£50
Deputy
is
Prime
worth more than 50
You take whichever-
euros.
you take
So
both if you like.
I want to take more of your money off you.
Yes.
So 50, do it in pounds.
You'll take a £50 that you'll be
£50
returning as Deputy Prime
Yes.
Minister. So we have a £50
we
bet.
have a £50 bet.
I'll give you that 50.
There
then
we
if you
go, we
like.
shake
Okay,
on it.
Good luck, and I hope I welcome you back on board the bus.
you so
This has
much.
been Election Call, where we're giving you the chances to hear from leading political figures throughout the campaign on LBC, where news is next.
Hang on, do I give this back to you?
You give that back to me if you